This session here, we have a new Zoom on One session this year, Technical Manager. And I'm looking very much forward to the presentation by our three presenters. We have two Davids. We have David Fergus of the Minnesota Association, and working a little bit more to the east, we have David Katz of the New York Association and Justin Kuo of the New England Association. And these three are very practiced at the art of technical management. So I'm going to send it over to the three, whoever wants to lead off for a little bit of an introduction, and then we will sit back and listen to what these gentlemen have to say. Go ahead, please.
Well, I'll go ahead and start because I'm the least experienced of the three. My name is David Fergus. I'm from Minnesota, and I'm very new to the technical manager role. I just have been doing it a year or two officially, although unofficially I've been doing it for many years in the local area. But at any rate, yeah, my only comment is that the rule book has very little to say about what the role is, and it's all a matter of practical experience that really gets you going well. And it basically says ensure the track, runways, circles, arcs, sectors, landing areas for field events, and all equipment are in accordance with the rules and shall verify the calibration of electronic measuring equipment. And certification of such shall be made to the appropriate referee prior to the commencement of the competition. So that's basically paragraph one of the rule book on our job title. And there's a lot packed into those couple sentences. So that's about all I'll have to say.
Well, you're right. There is a lot packed into that, and they certainly didn't describe it in the rule book. And as you stated right at the beginning, it really is a hands-on. You learn as you're going type situation for the position of technical manager. And I learned most of this stuff by following David Katz around and learning how he does things and learning how the people around him do things. I'm not that new to, or that experienced rather, in technical managing. I've really only gone to a couple of major events, and I've helped working in the position sort of as a technical manager in various smaller events, including some street type events here in the Boston area, and some events that we've had at our local indoor tracks and outdoor facilities. So I'm still in learning, and like anything technical, things are constantly changing, and there's always something else to see what's out there and to learn about it. And with that, I'll turn it over to David.
Hi, my name is David Katz, and I've been around quite a while. I think my birthstone is lava. I've been doing this for probably 40, 50 years, and I have people fooled that I think I know what I'm doing, which is pretty funny. I see the list of people on the right-hand side on the screen there. Just out of curiosity, I think some people would like to see them chime in if they would like to be a technical manager. Just curious if those people that are on here, if it's just curiosity, or some people actually would like to do this, because we do have a need for this. I do have a vast experience. I've served, I'm a certified official, of course. I've served as a technical delegate internationally for the Olympic Games, technical manager for several of our Olympic trials, technical director for several international competitions, world cross country and others. So I've got to see quite a bit. I do not do high school events. I don't work NCAA. I've only worked at USA Track and Field and World Athletic events. So questions that pertain to that, I think maybe some of my colleagues might be better able to answer those. So I do have a short presentation. David, I'm not sure if you prepared anything. It's not that formal, but we can go back and forth and discuss some of these things. David, do you have something that you'd like to share, or do you want me to take the lead on this? Or
Yeah, I'd prefer you take the lead. My only comment would be that, yeah, I have got some experience at the high school and college level. even though it's not defined in those two rule books, it's very helpful for meet management to have someone technical help them make sure their venues are correct. So the same kind of principles that we're learning here for USATF are very applicable to college and high school as well. So even though it's not in the rule book and not required position. So
yeah, the position is kind of unusual, and we have not always had this position. Actually, the USA Track and Field incorporated the technical manager back about 22 years ago. It was debated by the Rules Committee. I think at that time, Bob Hirsch told me, Bob just passed away, may he rest in peace. It was debated as the Katz rule, because what we had facilities people, people that would stripe the lines on the field, things like that, and we would have officials, but there was no official that would actually interact with the facilities people to ensure that the field, the play was technically compliant. So that's why we at USA Track and Field incorporated that role that was for many years with World Athletics, the technical manager. The role of the technical manager, and I'll share my screen here. I prepared a little bit of a slideshow, nothing very formal. And I apologize, David, for not having your name on here.
oh, no worries, David. That's what I say. I'm so new to this that I no need. So thank you.
Okay, so let me just go to the slideshow presentation here. So from the beginning. So I think you can see this here. This is from World Athletics, and I always start at the top and work my way down because usually the World Athletic rules are a little bit more in detail. And I'm just going to touch on each one of these right now on how this job has a certain mindset, and it really is a big picture mindset. Of course, you need to know the technical rules and all sorts of other stuff, but you have to be able to see things from 10,000 feet. And because you're part official, technical official, you're part presentation manager, you're part stagehand, and you really have to not only be detailed oriented, but you have to be able to see big picture at the same time. So it really is a unique type of individual that can be a successful technical manager. Obviously, that's dependent
also
on
behind the scenes. It's also a very much behind the scenes role too, David. So, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And please jump in at any time, Justin, or anybody else. And we have Bob Springer here, who's a very experienced technical manager. I'm a little bit quirky the way I do things because of my involvement with World Athletics and with USA Track and Field. So let me just go through some of this here. And I think some of it's blocked by some of these images on the side here. So let me see if I can move those out of the way. Technical manager shall be responsible for ensuring that, and I'm sorry to read through this, but then I will discuss each part of this. The track, the runways, circles, arcs, sectors, landing areas for field events, and all equipment and implements are in accordance with the rules. So that's basically the stage, all right? So we're putting on a show. We're setting the stage for the athletes. And it's extremely important that that stage is technically correct, because we have a sacred oath out there that we have to make sure that that stage is correct for the athletes so they can perform at their highest level and their performances are accepted for qualifying records, rankings, or whatever. 16.1.2, the placement and removal of equipment and implements according to the technical organizational plan for the competition as approved by the technical delegates, or in the case of USA Track and Field, the organizing committee, or the meet director or the race director. And most of the time, this is not an issue, the placement and removal of equipment and implements according to the technical organization. But as you get higher up in the type of competition, it becomes more of a show. And that's very important. And I think one of the things that I try and teach other officials is that the presentation of what we do is extremely important, because we help sell our sport. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a few minutes. 16.1.3, the technical presentation of the competition areas is accordance with this with such plan. Okay, the checking and marking of any personal implements permitted for the competition is according to Rule 32.2. These are World Athletic Rules. And by the way, as many of you know, that is not the technical manager's role for USA Track and Field, because we have our specialty officials for weights and measures. Internationally, the technical manager is responsible for the implements. And 16.1.5, they have received or is aware of the existence of necessary certifications under Rule 10.1 of the technical rules before the competition. That means the certification of the track, if there is one, or the line markings, the schematic. It's very important that the technical manager knows all of these things. Okay, going on to the next slide. How can you tell if someone's a technical manager? This is a little tongue-in-cheek here. Great attention to detail, highly organized. They're the ones with the soiled uniforms before the meet starts, because we've been playing in the mud. Excellent knowledge of the rules, can see the big picture, very open-minded. You're going to be confronted with all sorts of issues, and you have to be a very, very good problem solver. Own tools and stuff. Every technical manager I know, when they show up to a meet, if they're driving there, their car is full of stuff. We're not only talking about more than one steel tape, we're talking about different color rolls of duct tape, nails, hammers, all sorts of things. They're ready to fix anything. Okay, and they're the only person that can hammer nails into the track without getting arrested by the owner of the facility. And above all, they're bilingual. We can speak both metric and imperial at the same time. So, by the way, English is my second language. Brooklyn is my first. Okay. There are lots of rule books out there, and this is part of the problem being a technical manager. I know, Dave, you pointed out that you work with high school and college. Okay, we the rest of the world has one rule book, and the one rule book is the World Athletics. We have the USA Track and Field one, we have the NCAA, we have the high school. So if you're going to be a technical manager, you have to be well versed in that particular rule book, because they are different. The rules are different when it comes to things that we are especially concerned about. And then there's the other rule book. You don't want to be that official, because too often people make up their own rules. Okay, one of my mentors was this man, Ted Corbett, who was a 1952 Olympian in the marathon. He also helped develop the measuring system that we use in the United States for measuring roads. And he was the smartest man I've ever met. He was so smart, he knew what he didn't know, but he knew who to ask. I've been doing this a long time, and I do not pretend to know everything I need to know. I ask people. Quite often I'll go at an event, I'm working as a technical manager, I'll go to the field events where the field event officials are setting up their venue, and I'll ask them questions. And I know sometimes they'll say, oh, you're only trying to test this, David. I said, no, I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to learn from you, because nobody knows all of this stuff. And by the way, talking about field event and officials, I am a firm believer in giving ownership to the field event officials to set up their particular venue. I can set it up. Justin can set it up. I'm sure David and Bob, you can set it up too. But if you allow the officials to come out early, way before the competition starts, and let them, I'll say, play with their venue, with their area, then they can make it the way they want it. We can come over and just do a double check. And that way there's no problems once the competition starts. They take ownership in this. So I believe very highly in that, to make sure that the officials have ownership in their field events.
David?
Yes, sir.
If I could add something on that, one of the easiest places to be technical manager is Hayward Field.
Yes, you got great officials there. Absolutely.
Lance knows what he's doing, gets it done right. It doesn't take much to overlook what he's done. By the way, also, we have someone with a question up there, a hand raised for Jackie White. Jackie wants to throw in something here.
Jackie, please.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to ask if there was a checklist. You're going through a lot of things, and for me, with this being a position that we will have for the youth championships, I'm wondering if there's a checklist that's available for us that we can review, just to make sure that all of those things that need to be done are done. And as we're working with the technical managers that will be in Oregon for the JL championships, we are working in tandem, and we understand all of the things that they need to have and the things that they need to do to do their jobs.
Check the best
Jackie,
practices.
that's a great question. And there is best practices on the USA Track and Field website, which
Okay.
I'll show you the link. I have that as a slide. And
Okay.
also George Kleeman created this very comprehensive document back in 2002, which we can, Justin, make available. Justin, I tried to find where you found that one, but it's really a remarkable document. It goes into great detail. And one of the slides I have later on, Jackie, I'm available 24/7 for
Wonderful.
questions.
Okay.
Don't tell it, my wife can't hear that. And Justin by email.
He's willing
and
to
I'm
call
sure-
your bluff because he doesn't think that you can go through a day without sleeping. So he's planning on you being asleep.
Nah, this is true. I mean, I'm available 24/7 for questions, and I do get questions all throughout the day and night. And Bob is here too, and Ed Gorman will have his contact information. So we're not leaving you hanging. It really is a complicated job. There's a lot to it. And that's why I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'll go into some examples of some of the things that we deal with. But it's very comprehensive. And really, it's a combination of all of your field event chiefs, your referee, and a few other things, and your facilities guy, all wrapped up into one. So it's not easy to do. But you have a bunch of people that can do it as a team together at that stage.
Wonderful.
Okay, next slide. Okay. I came up with this term several years ago, and actually it's now been embraced by some of my friends from World Athletics: mission critical rules. Rules required for the ratification of records, qualifying standards, or World Athletics ranking points. We have hundreds of rules in our rule book. World Athletics has hundreds of rules as well. And believe it or not all those rules are necessary for records. Can you have a competition without following all of the rules? And this is important not only for all the officials, but for the technical manager, especially if you're looking for an athlete trying to qualify for the World Championships, the Olympic Games, or a world record, or just getting a new World Athletics ranking points. And to give you an example, I was working, this is a road race, the Sub-2 project in Monza, Italy, a couple of years ago, when Eliud Kipchoge was first attempting to run under 2 hours. And the day before the competition, the Italian Federation demanded that I meet with them because I was their technical advisor for the event. And they said, we cannot issue a sanction because you're not following all the rules, because we had pace setters coming in and out during the competition. And I said, okay, but we're providing pace setters for all of the athletes because there were only 3 athletes. All right. So as long as the competition was safe and was equitable, we were treating all the athletes the same, we can still have a fair competition, but none of the performances would count for anything. And they said, well, you can't do that. I said, well, what about having a sprint race without a wind gauge, or a sprint race without electronic starting blocks? And then they finally understood the whole concept of this. I mean, there were rules in our rule book for many, many years that for indoors, we only had one option, World Athletics, for a 1-turn stagger. So as you know, here in the United States, we conventionally run 2-turn staggers all the time. So what if somebody set a world record on a 2-turn stagger? Would that count? Well, according to the rules, it shouldn't count, but it's not a mission critical rule. So we actually ended up changing that rule. There's another example of that, which I will show you later on. Something that happened that I don't think has ever happened before at the 10,000 meter race at our Olympic trials 2 years ago for women. And some of you might remember that, and I'll come back to that in a few more minutes. Baseball. What does this have to do with track and field? Baseball is the American pastime, okay? And I was the technical delegate at the at the Pan American Games back in 2015 in Toronto. And was getting ready for the morning session. And I went over to the shot put area and I'm looking around and I called all the officials over and I asked them, do you like baseball? And they looked at me like I'm crazy. Well, I am anyway. And they said, sure, we have the Toronto Blue Jays here, but what in the world are you talking about? So I said, let me ask you a question. In baseball, where do they keep the bats? And they said, by the dugout. I said, okay, so how come you have the bats by home plate over here? And what I meant was they had the rack with the shots right next to the circle. Okay, where am I going with this? Regardless of the level of competition that you're dealing with, whether it's youth or juniors or Olympians, what you want to do is when you create your venue, your different field event areas, you want it to highlight the athletes and not the equipment or the officials. Nobody ever paid $1 to see an official or a piece of equipment. They pay to see the athletes. So this is a little bit out of some people's comfort zone because they put equipment where they think it needs to be. But, move the shot put rack closer to where the athletes are or, where the return rack is, but move it away so the area where the athlete is actually going to be performing is clear and open so everybody can see it. It's less cluttered. And you can apply this to any stage level competition. What's really important is communicating with the organizers. My job as a technical manager does not begin the morning of the event. It actually begins weeks or months before the event. When I work as a technical manager, for example, for the outdoors and the indoor championships, I'm on the phone and meetings with Ed Gorman months and months in advance. Okay, let me see the schematic. What's the schedule? Okay, he'll show me the schedule. And I said, you know what? We can't get the hurdles on that fast. So we can't do this. We can't do that because we don't have the time to do that. All right. And sometimes we're not perfect. We do make mistakes. I'll give you an example. When we had the outdoor championships, I think at Sacramento several years ago, we had the steeplechase and we had not planned on filling up the water in the pit until a certain time, but then we found out that the spigot was on the other side of the pole vault runways, and we would have to cross a hose across the pole vault runways, and the pole vault was taking place at that time. So you have to be able to plan in advance to make sure that you are able to do what is needed to be done. So every morning of the competition, it really is important to meet with the organizers well in advance. Give yourself time to solve problems. My father was a cook in a luncheonette, a breakfast place, and he opened up the restaurant every morning. It would open up at 6 o'clock, and he was there at 4 o'clock. He was there to make sure that the grill was hot, everything was working properly. You always have time before the event begins. You don't have time when the event starts to try and solve problems. Try and reduce the number of problems in advance. This is a photo. A lot of you were there in Eugene. This was at the World Championships. I'm meeting there with Luca, who is the technical competition manager for World Athletics. And there is Zhang Edstrom in the background, who is one of the TDs. And so we met every single morning and we reviewed every single part of that field of play before competition started. Records. I know Scott asked me to touch on records. We got to make sure that we cross all the T's and dot all the I's. You may know this or not, but we've lost a lot of records in the United States because of technical deficiencies. And there's a lot of discussion, what's right, what's wrong. And I always suggest to people, if you don't know, if you have any questions, call. If you're putting on a competition and you anticipate that there might be athletes at your competition who are going to potentially set records, find out what you need to do in advance, because even some of the most veteran officials don't fully know what's required for a record. And especially when it comes to the technical manager in the field of play, let's talk about, for example, the long throws. There are requirements by World Athletics and USA Track and Field that the throwing field, the landing field, has to be level. And there are forms that need to be filled out. And we're not talking about just taking a level with a bubble out there to determine if it's level. You have to take out a total station. It has to be properly done. And that has to be submitted with the record application unless the track is already certified by World Athletics. Which rules are important? One of the ways to find out which rules are important is look at the record application form, either by World Athletics or USA Track and Field, and reverse engineer. You can see what's on there that would be required, and that's a good starting point. If you go to the World Athletics website, and I can go there later on and just help you navigate around, you can find all the record forms on there. And I can show you, in this particular case, you can see on the screen, there's one for race walking, road events, combined events, track, field events, and at the bottom is track long. This is the biggest problem with records: cones and curbs. Okay, most people are totally mixed up with this, and it's understandable. All right, cones should not be used to replace an entire curb if the track was built surveyed to have a curb. Only short sections, for example, with the high jump and javelin. Most of you on this call know that when a track is measured and marked to have a curb, the measured line is 30 centimeters from that curb. All the other lanes are 20 centimeters from the white line. There are some tracks that are measured and built not to have a curb, and where that curb would have been, the track is measured 20 centimeters from that white line. World Athletics, I think I have this on the next slide. There we go. World Athletics accepts performances. I can't see my whole slide. Back up a second. Sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. They only accept performances from outdoor tracks that have a curb. Tracks, they do accept performances from indoor tracks with a curb or without a curb, but the ones that are made not to have a curb, you have to have the cones correctly placed. There have been several competitions here in the United States over the past couple of years that have been run on high school tracks that were surveyed and measured not to have a curb, but those race directors, meeting directors, wanted to have their performances accepted by World Athletics. And we worked it out with World Athletics that they put a curb down on the track using hundreds and hundreds of bricks because they're about the right size. But if you do the math, you will figure out very, very quickly that if you have a track that was surveyed not to have a curb and then you put one down, now you have a 10 centimeter radius difference and you have to alter your starting lines. And that gets a little bit complicated, but we have helped several our meet directors with that over the past couple of years.
During COVID, I don't know if you knew about this, you probably did, David. There were those pop-up meets that had occurred, and 2 of them were held at Newburgh High School in Oregon. And for the meet, because the track did not have a curb, 1 was brought in, and because a curb was brought in, then the markings had to be laid down that David was referring to, so that the running line is 30 centimeters off from from the curb, meaning that all the starts were pushed back toward the finish line. And that was very interesting to see. There were 2 of those meets that occurred.
Yeah, it was interesting. The first time I did it, I helped out with a meet up in Massachusetts, and somebody was running the 5,000. And when you think about it, for each lap, it's a 62 centimeter difference. So, I mean, it becomes very, very interesting. So the person in the 5,000 meter, he made the Olympic standard by 1 second.
Wow. I don't know, I assume a lot of people know this, but the measured distance on the inside line of a track is not 400 meters. It's 398.116, right?
Right, because the measured line is 30 centimeters out if you have a curb, or 20 centimeters out if you have that's correct. Okay, And just to show you cone placement, because this is everything is on video these days, every performance, every competition, so you can see when cones are placed correctly or not. As most of us know, when you're, for example, in lane number 4, the lane line to your left is actually part of lane number 3. So the cones are placed on that lane line with the outer edge actually delineating that lane number 3. So that's really the proper place. And if that, where you see those blue cones, those blue circles, if that was actually a track that was measured not to have a curb, that would be the inside white line, and that's how you would place the cones, right on that line as such. That would be the proper place. Question number 1. You show up to a track and do not see a curb. How can you tell if the track was built or surveyed to have a curb or not? The correct answer will get you $1 million. So I'll hold off for a moment here. Seeing how the javelin one went 2 hours, I can spend a minute to see if anybody can come up with this answer here.
Maybe they can put that in the chat. In the meantime, somebody asked a question: can you address records versus qualifying marks to advance to a higher competition, and what the differences in requirements are, if any?
Yeah. Yeah, it's first of all, world records and American records require drug testing. That's one thing that's not part of our technical wheelhouse. So any world record, any open world record, any open American record requires doping. And by the way, drug testing rules for American records are slightly different than world records. And again, this is not part of the technical manager, but I will point this out because this is extremely important. For a world record, the athlete needs to be drug tested immediately after the event. Now, what I mean by immediately after the event, it doesn't have to be as soon as they cross the finish line, they have to pee into a bottle. It basically means at the event or shortly after the event. Somewhere embedded in their documentation from World Athletics Medical, it's really the first passing of urine. Because the United States is so big and we can't always get our drug testing people where they need to be quickly enough, we allow 24 hours for drug testing. That has caused us here in the United States over the decade to lose some records because it wasn't anticipated that an individual was going to be setting a record and drug testing was not available. And by the time we got one there, it was past the immediate time period, and therefore the World Athletics did not accept a record.
Lance Armstrong had made a comment about how EPO was the perfect drug. It was, it obviously increased red blood cell count, and it could be expelled from the body well within a 24-hour period.
Through all my years dealing with World Athletics and USA Track and Field, I know better than to deal with or get involved with drug testing. I like to stay in my lanes of the technical parts. So that's for people who are a lot smarter than me and the medical professionals. So I will stay away from that. Also, too, difference between records and rankings and qualifying. The highest standards are for records, and the requirements for qualifying or ranking points in some areas, in some events, are a lot looser. I'll address, for example, one that most people aren't involved with here, the marathon. Okay, for a world record for the marathon, the course cannot have a drop that exceeds 1 meter per kilometer from the start to the finish. And it cannot be point to point. It has to have a start and finish within 50% of the total distance. So for example, the start and finish of a marathon must be within 42 kilometers of each other. So not 21 kilometers of each other. But for qualifying for the World Championships, we can take a course. They'll accept a course that has any configuration. It could be a point to point. So again, each of the events here might have a little bit more critical requirements for a world record than would be for rankings. So that's basically the difference. Anybody get the answer for this yet? Anybody in the chat room?
You had several answers over there. Somebody wrote a really big compass. Another, use an accurate measuring wheel and walk the track 30 centimeters out. Someone else wrote, contact the track design crew. Another, ask to see the surveyor's chart and sign off. Another one, good luck finding that, Doug. The measure line, I guess. If you were the technical manager of an event, you would know because you had asked for the specs of the facility prior to the event. The measure line keeps coming up here.
So there's a story of a science teacher, and I was a middle school science teacher for 36 years, who was teaching about barometric pressure, and he gave all the students in the room a barometer, and he asked his students, your homework assignment tonight is to find out how tall the building is with the barometer. And of course, you know that the atmospheric pressure changes as you go higher in elevation. So the next day, the only one in the class, little Johnny, was the one that got the right answer. And the science teacher was incredibly impressed. And he asked, Johnny, how did you find out the right answer for this? You know, what formula did you use? And he said, what formula? I went to the custodian. I said, listen, if you tell me how tall this building is, I'll give you this barometer. So, sorry, these are bad jokes. I apologize. Okay, so we go back to what I spoke about a few minutes ago about that the track is measured 30 centimeters out if you have a curb and 20 centimeters out if you don't have a curb. All you have to do is measure the offset of the stagger for a 400 meter from lane 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3. If it's the same all the way through, that means that the track was measured without a curb, because the radius would be different, the running line from lane 1 to 2 than it would be from 2 to 3. So it's some of you might understand what I just said. If you didn't, it's okay.
Yeah.
Bob, did you get that one? Springer, just
Yeah,
shaking
oh,
his head.
yeah, I had to do it one time, but that's not how we did it. But yeah, we actually it was a high school track without a curb. I found out later it had been surveyed for a curb, they just hadn't put one in. And we walked the track with a wheel with a water bottle, 30 centimeters, to get us a distance from the inside lane line. We did it 3 times, and the average 400 meters. So we figured
Nice.
it was with a curb. That
Well,
was
you-
for Brooks meet that they wanted some of the pros running 1,500, and they want to make sure the track would be legal. They put
Well,
a curb in for that race.
You have a lot steadier hand than I do. I don't think I would have been able to do that. Okay, moving along. Okay, question number 2. What are the 3 lines on the track? What are the 3 lines on the track and field that are not 5 centimeters wide? Correct answer, you get $1 million, and a bonus $2 million if you add the widths.
Do you have lines extended or 7 centimeters?
That's one.
Pole vault
Up.
zero, pole vault 0 line 1 centimeter.
Who is that?
Doug,
Doug, well done, Doug.
thank you.
And the last one. There might be more than,
That's 3 lines. There's 2 lines extended there, David.
The steeplechase,
Okay.
steeplechase line.
okay,
The
and
bear-
that one is, the steeplechase marker is 10 centimeters. Well, you have to split the $1 million and you have to come over here in the next 30 seconds to collect. Okay, moving along. Last question of the day. What is the formula for the temperature correction of a steel tape measure? Correct answer is $3 million. Bonus, who cares? You get $4 million.
Oh,
That's only 30,000 and 40,000, Dave.
Okay, so we're gonna go past that up. Okay, so moving along, this is something that all technical managers should ask for. This was Justin and I were fortunate enough to work at the New Balance meet this past weekend, and I got the measurement report from World Athletics. And if you ever want to see one of those, I'll send you a part of one. They're quite comprehensive, the measurement report. And this was very, very helpful. I got this a couple weeks before, and I zoomed in and saw all of the available lines on the track, and some of them I found to be very, very interesting. This was very, very helpful in our planning of the events. One of the things that we had, I don't know if you watched the competition over the past week, we had 2 field events, and we had a high jump that was originally scheduled to start at 2:30. The first sprint race, women's 60, was to go off at 3:10, and then we had a pole vault that had to go off at 4 o'clock, and this was a TV window starting at 4 o'clock. So immediately I said, well, we have really no place to put the high jump because we can't put it on the sprint straightaway, where a lot of people would normally put it. And you can see on this diagram, if you see closely there, they have an image there of where they would normally have the high jump. So it really didn't work, because if the high jump ran late, then we have a problem with the sprints. Now, some of you have experience with international competitions, and we did this last year at the indoor championships. We actually put the high jump across in this area over here, and the athletes went across. And that way, if we did have to run a sprint, we just hold up the high jump. That was as long as there was no pole vault going on. But then we found out something very interesting when we got to the venue on Friday. This area between the runways and the sprint straightaways had a different substrate than the runways and the sprint straightaway, and it had a different feel to it. And my original position for the high.
David, you muted.
Unmute, David. I made a mistake.
Okay,
There he is.
now I'm unmuted. So the original position for the high jump mats was going to be over here, but that meant that the high jumpers had to run across 1, 2, 3, 4 different surfaces before they were able to take off. And we just did not think that was, the best thing. Plus, when you're dealing with a high jump with world-class athletes, the high jump venue really should be a box that's 16 meters wide and about 27, 28 meters long, because some of these athletes have quite a long approach. And the reason for 16 meters wide, well, as we know, the distance between the 2 uprights is 4 meters, and the person with the longest approach, usually not longest, the widest approach, starts 5 to 6 meters out. And you've seen this high jumpers, they'll go over and they'll measure from the uprights out, and they'll measure down. So it's 4 meters plus 6 on each side. So you're dealing with a box of 16 meters. So we had to find that sweet spot that was between this pole vault box, and we had a pole vault over here. So we found, what we did was we eventually moved the pit up to be right on the edge of the sprint straightaway. And that way the athletes would be on a consistent surface for the last 4 or 5 strides before they would take off. So these are some of the type of issues that a technical manager should be dealing with. All right. Because if we didn't do that, I'm sure we would have had complaints from the athletes, and they would say, can you move this during the competition? The other thing that worked out well for us is the outside of the lane line here, the white line, we use that as our 3 meter line each side, so we didn't have to put down a tape mark down there for that. Let's go to the next slide. Resources, and we're getting to the end of this part of the presentation here. This is from the USA Track and Field website. If you click on, there is a very nice document there, best practices for USA Track and Field Technical Manager. So you have a problem, who are you going to call? Okay, you're not going to call Bill Murray or Dan Aykroyd. There is contact information. I was the only one that would put the phone. I didn't want to put Ed Gorman's phone number down where Justin Kuo, because they have real lives. I don't. So you can bother me at any time. Let's see if I have another slide or not. And that's that part of the presentation. If you want to, Justin has taken about 1,000 photographs. I cut it down to about a dozen or two that shows some of the things that we have done over the past year or so to give some examples of what a technical manager would be doing. Anybody interested in doing a question? We have more chats in there, Justin?
You had somebody who has said a question for clarification. If you're adding a curb to a track without a curb, why are you remeasuring lane 1? I'm guessing that with a curb, the athlete is running slightly further away from the inside for safety to not turn the foot on the curb. So running in lane 1 would be a larger radius and running more, not less.
Yeah, they're running more, so you have to shorten, you have to adjust your starting lines up because you're running a bigger oval. Because now you're running with a radius that's 10 centimeters wider than you had before, so it's a bigger circle. So if you're running a bigger circle in each lap, that means you're running a little bit more than 400 meters. So you adjust your starting line appropriately for each of the laps.
And it's actually that, as you mentioned, 0.62 meters longer per lap.
Right, it's 2 times pi.
Times the 10 centimeters.
Yeah. Thank you, Justin. David, you want to add anything to this, or Justin to, because I just made all this stuff up.
We're impressed.
Let me do this if I can find it. So here's some photos from our work in Eugene this year. Justin also worked at the high school meet, and he did some really great work out there. That's Justin out the field playing with a steel tape. He always likes to play, have fun.
So
Okay, so
Justin,
here-
that's the discus sector that you were laying out at that point, or jab?
Yeah, so here's one of the issues that we had to deal with. Okay, the safety zone, the danger zone of the discus, and you can see here in this area here, this was where the Seiko clock was and the start mechanisms and everything else. So we had to be really careful with this. Again, we talked about making sure you know the equipment ahead of time. Check out the equipment, make sure you have enough of everything you need. We went through lots of hurdles at the World Championships, even though they're brand new. Those athletes are big and powerful, and they crashed through a bunch of them. And we actually used every single extra hurdle that we had. Another thing that you have to deal with at the higher levels, you have to deal with television. And television, they know what they want to do, and sometimes it doesn't always sync with what we want them to do. And one of the things is cameras. This is for the pole vault, making sure that the camera is on the pole vault upright in a position that doesn't affect the operation of the uprights, and also is a position that does not compromise the integrity of the competition. In other words, if a pole hits it, a crossbar or something, it's safe or wouldn't affect the competition. So we're constantly dealing with television, and you have to be there when TV gets there, because also too, they're going to put cables down wherever they want to, and they're going to take the shortest path to get to where they want to go. And quite often that pathway cuts across an area that you don't want them. And one of the things you always have to watch for is that putting down cables by the curb, where a curb is going to be picked up because of a high jump or a javelin. So obviously in Eugene, that was not an issue because all the field events are within the curb. But what's also surprising, and this is remarkable, and hopefully they'll fix this in the near future, the curb at Haywood Field is not bolted to the track, and it very easily gets displaced. So the curb at the that first turn there was constantly being monitored because it was being kicked out of place. And myself, Justin, and Jim Flanick, the other technical manager, we were constantly going out there to fix the curb, because one of the things that always, tears apart my DNA is watching a competition and seeing a curvy curb out there. And I was just watching part of the Boston meet, and I failed to check the curb, and it was pretty ugly. So it's I'm beating myself up about that. Again, here is they're working on the camera for the uprights.
David,
Yes,
can
sir.
you go back to that last photo?
Yep.
I noticed that in the other photo too, all the tape marks that are placed down there, that's for television,
No,
assume?
these tape marks over here,
Yeah,
that's World Athletics requirement for a runway.
and it's every meter?
I believe it's every 0.5.
Okay,
It's in the rule book.
The World Athletics Rulebook.
World, and this is very, very cool. And I haven't seen these in too many places. This is the Mondo lane markers that they provide, and they're kind of cool because we had more than 12 athletes in there. The technical delegate marked them with different colored tapes to ensure that every athlete had a set of 2. And the competition director had us do something that I've never seen before, and hopefully I'll never see it again. He had me create labels for every athlete in every field event that had a lane or a jumping point off to put their label on the markers. So the officials can easily see who belonged to what marker. So those are the labels that we had to create those for every single event in our technical manager's office. So we had to, and we didn't have an easy file to work with. What I had to do every morning was download the list from the website of who was in which event that day and create the labels.
oh,
Everybody can recognize this. This is from our USA Championship Olympic trials, actually. Beautiful setup at Haywood Field. One of the challenges, as all the officials from Haywood Field or any athlete for any competition on a surface like this, it's not easy to put a tape mark down. And the officials are very well versed in using thumbtacks or staples or whatever to make sure you get that nice line. Another shot of the runway markers. This was a situation that you would probably never come across. This was very, very cool though and nerdy. Sydney McLaughlin had just broke the world record in the 400-meter hurdles. She demolished the world record. And part of the ratification process is that we take possession of the athlete's shoes for further testing from the labs from World Athletics. And she had given her shoes to her husband right after the competition, which would not normally be a problem because easy to get back, but she was also running in the 4x4 relay 2 days later. So the officials ran over to me and said, David, we have an issue. Could you help resolve it? And they first were very reluctant to give up her shoes because she needed them. And here was a USA team manager over here who recognized me immediately and assured the family of Sydney that I was legitimate. And we guaranteed that we were going to take some pictures of the shoes, or write some things down about the shoes, and I would come back within a few minutes and give him back the shoes so she would have them to compete for the 4x4 relay. The things that we do. Just a picture of the spectacular cage that Lance has created out there, the one that's retractable. It's really a work of art. Just some of the other things we do. We have requests. We have done this many times. And I'm surprised that the tracks are not striped like this to begin with, to have an accurate location for the 1K and 2K of the steeplechase.
Yeah.
Just some shots from the shot put. This was actually from the USA Championships. At the World Championships, they use chalk for the arcs, but we use sector lines, sector tape for the sector lines on the outside. This is from Justin. Justin, you want to tell them what you were doing here?
No, this was I think this was one of the high school championships that we had out there. In this case, we were, this is the outside, so the lanes 5 through 9, they wanted an extra waterfall for the mile, and they didn't have one, so we created one. The cones are indicating that the spots where we marked that arc, and I think in one of the upcoming pictures there's a little description on how we create that arc. You could do it mathematically, but there's far easier way if you have a few tools along. We
Yeah,
had
the mathematical way is complicated, and the way to do it with a tape measure, it's kind of nerdy but cool. There's the beautiful work that Justin did putting down that line. I'm showing this picture because this is my favorite type of tape measure. I collect tape measures. I go around the world buying tape measures. I always like to use, of course, this doesn't work well when you're doing a long jump. If you're using a tape measure for the long jump of the throws, I want to have a zero mark that's not at the end of the tape, so I can get a more accurate reading. If I have a tape measure that has the zero where the ring is, I always start doing my measuring from at the 10 centimeter mark, so I can have a much clearer, crisp line when I'm doing a measurement. Here's a situation that I told you about in Boston. You can see where we actually ended up putting that high jump pit, and the sprint surface was different than the grade surface, then different than the long jump runway surface, then different than the other one. So the athletes would have been really at a disadvantage with a much different feel underneath them. And you can see we use the laying line for the 3 meter line, so that saves some extra work. And there it is from the other side. This is a magnificent facility. This is the New Balance indoor track that they just built part of the New Balance complex. Oh, so what we did was the track there at New Balance has 2 turning staggers, as many high school and colleges have, and they didn't have a 1 turn, 2 groups staggered. They also had a 2 turn 1 mile. So what Justin and I did was we wanted to create a 1 turn 1 mile staggered and a 1 turn just standard staggered. So this is how you do it. Some of you know how to do this already. These are great little tools that Justin has. They're these little pins on plastic tips that are used for working with leather. So you measure out 20 centimeters from that white line. And we did that basically every 1.5 feet or so. We put down the pin and you run your tape against it, and you strike out your arc from that. It's a really cool process, and something I like to do because it's kind of nerdy, and it's the only time you get to put big pins or nails into the track. So that's it, just showing the process there. And what we did was I wasn't sure whether we were going to use it, and I didn't want to put down a full line down of tape because, you know, the athletes will run on it over it in previous races and spike holes, and it would be hard to pull up. So I was prepared to put that tape down 5 minutes before the event was starting if they want to go with that option. Here's another picture of Justin's, I believe this was the
I think that's a 2 mile mark.
2 mile what was it, Justin? 2 mile mark, yeah.
2 mile. You could see that the guys are standing approximately on the 1 mile.
Right, there we go.
Hayward Field, and they don't have a 2 mile start. Somebody put a little piece of tape on underneath the curb to indicate where that is. But if you're going to have a large group, you'll want a nice curve, curved so that they can start fairly.
Okay. This is a solution that I came up with several years ago. In 2014, Eugene hosted the World Junior Championships, and we had
Hi, Papa.
what's that? Question? So what happened was we had the markers from UCS, as you see, the ones on the left-hand side, they're the yellow ones, which all of us have seen before. And the competition director from World Athletics says, I don't want to use those distances, and I want to use metric distances. I said, Paul, we have ones that are very, very close, like the 16 meter, 52 feet and so on. And he goes, no, I want to use what I want. And this was 2 days before the event. And well, maybe we'll, print them something and tape it on or whatever. And the people from UCS was there. And for those of you that don't know, UCS started as a canvas company. They made canvas bags. So they were very helpful. I said, listen, can we make a sleeve that goes over your plastic markers there and just have different things printed on? And he says, yeah, we can do that in one day, because that's what we do. We make vinyl and canvas bags. So I gave him a list of the ones that we needed. And the next day they were shipped over to us. And we just picked and choose what we needed for each of the events. So it ended up to being pretty cool. So that was a simple solution. One of the things that we talked about before is dealing with cameras, making sure that the cameras are in positions where they don't affect the athletes. And you can see that's Jim Flanick there. I can tell because he's not wearing sneakers. He likes to wear his loafers, his brown loafers. I can always tell Jim. Jim, myself, Justin, we always carry a tape measure, and we check everything. We double and triple check everything that's out there. And we did that at the World Championships for every single steeplechase barrier and every single hurdle for every race. The competition director did not want the umpires to be out there on the track. He wanted them in the stands. So we had the hurdle crews set up all these things, but there was no official to truly check. So we worked it out with the competition director that at least one of us would go out there and check everything prior to the start of any of the hurdle races or steeplechase races. Preparation, doing things in advance is really important. And Justin came up with these different color markers. And what we did was we measured and marked out all of the long throw sectors and arcs before the competition. So we were able to do a fast transition. I don't think I have one to show you. Hang on a second. Let me go back. Sorry. These slides are not in order. This was the hammock cage that we used that was only up for 1 or 2 days. It was very unique because it was anchored into the shot put landing areas, and it caused some problems with the scheduling because obviously you could not have shot put at that time. We got very, very lucky. They gave us an office, and for Justin, myself, and Jim, and it really helped with the planning and preparation of everything that we needed to do. Here's another picture of this is the end of that discus left sector, and you can see all of the potential damage that discus could have done over here. This is Imre Matrahazi, who's the technical manager, technical officer of World Athletics. This gentleman here is the head of Seiko timing, and we went over all the potential problems for that. There's another look of what that would look like and a nice target for the discus. This was an interesting situation that we had. The hammer and javelin sector areas, landing areas, went across the pole vault runway. And so the facilities people there did a great job of putting down a temporary surface. This is the pole vault runway. And fortunately, it did not do any damage to the runway when the hammer landed, if the hammer did land there. Here's another look from the other direction. You can go back, and there is a pole vault runway, and with the facilities people, they did a great job in covering that up. And there's another marker. We had these all over. Let me go back a second. Sorry. We actually, these markers were very, very helpful because one day we had to do a transition between two long throws. I think some of you might have been involved. So I was able to get a bunch of officials to volunteer to help out. And we did the transition, pulling up the sector lines and the arcs and putting down the new sector lines and arcs between the two long throws. We did it in under 7 minutes. Just a matter of coordination. That's the Seiko horizontal jump device to determine fouls, and it's just the way that they calibrate it. Of course, you know, that's our new rule with World Athletics and USA Track and Field. It's no longer touch beyond the plane. It's now breaking the plane. There's another shot of the anchor of the hammer cage. There was concrete embedded below, deep enough to ensure that it didn't affect when we did the shot put.
Wow.
Another thing that we talked about this before, dealing with photographers and television. This is a TV a camera that goes around on the track. We had to make sure that this did not interfere with the competition for the hammer. So that's one thing that was on our checklist of things to do. And there was the completed hammer cage, which was actually spectacular. And I was very happy to see that we did not do any damage to any runways or any pieces of equipment. Another shot of it going across the pole vault runway. Another shot. Here's replacement turf. Sorry. These are different type of staples. The ones provided by Mondo for the sector tape. The diameter of the metal is much thicker than the normal staples that we use. They were absolutely great, and they were also very, very helpful for helping to keep wires, TV wires, cabling, and everything else controlled in other areas. The only problem is they're a lot longer than a normal staple. You can see they're 5 inches long, which makes them probably about 2 inches deeper than the irrigation system.
We had to stop using them at one point.
Yeah, so but it was something that they said they can easily replace. But World Championship hurdles, again, we had replacements, but we used all of them. Just a nice shot of them. You know, one thing is with a brand new hurdle, there a lot of these now are marked to the correct positioning, and I'm a stickler for the correct positioning of hurdles. And what people don't realize is that after the first couple of times, once they hit, these marks become kind of useless. What you have to do is you have to line up the crossbar with this line over here. It's the front of the crossbar with this. So because they become no longer too straight at the top. And you always have to check the mechanism to know that they work, and check them before they go out there. Make sure they're going to go up and down. Sorry about that. This is something that a lot of you may not be familiar with. There's what's called a VDM, video distance measuring device, and we've been using it for over a decade now for the long jump and triple jump. But over the past several years, they've developed it for the shot put as well. So we no longer use a tape measure. We no longer use a laser for the World Championship Olympic Games. We do it by a video system. And these are the Seiko technicians out here, and they're calibrating the landing sector for the cameras. And I'll show you another shot of that. Here's one camera. There's only 2 cameras being used, one camera on this side, and there's another camera on the other side. And they calibrate it off of these markers on the in the sector area. And there's a person up in the booth who's actually doing the measuring. And there we are again, we're talking with the TDs. Here are the markers on the runway that David was pointing to before. We had to measure out mark according to specs. A really good look at the shot put area, and you can see we had sector tape down the side, and we had chalk for across. And there you can still see the calibration marks. They're still working on that in the infield there. Another shot of it from the side. Another thing we talked about before, cabling and wiring. We got to make sure there's actually cabling going down here. We got to make sure it's not a safety hazard. You know, we're all out there for the same reason. The TV to highlight this, the photographers and the athletes, but the most important thing, number one, is the safety of the athletes. These are very cool. These were the brake line markers that are provided by Mondo, and it's basically a piece of hard foam rubber, 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters by 15 centimeters, which is 6 inches, and it sits on this metal plate, and this is pretty heavy, and it sits exactly over the brake line that we need. Here's another shot of the discus sector with the danger area. We put up, as you can see, netting. This was actually the starters platform. So you see, this could have been very problematic, but we kept our fingers crossed. And fortunately, we did not have an incident. And there I am. This is when I do sector lines. I use these little surveyor's flags you can buy at Home Depot, and we measure across. And I put a little dot down with paint, and I put these flags out there, and then I run my sector tape against these wire flags, and I get a really nice arc because of those flags out there. That's something I've been doing for many, many years, doing my arcs like that. And I believe that's it, ladies and gentlemen.
So when you are laying out that arc, what is guiding you going across? You have the tape?
Yeah, what I do is, obviously there'll be somebody in the circle holding the tape. And I'll be holding the other tape, or maybe I'll have somebody else holding the other end. And let's say I'm doing a 70-meter arc. As I start from the left-hand side, I will put a flag in, on 70 on the steel tape, right there with that little flag. And then I go a couple of meters and I put another one, I go all the way across. So they would, I'm not sure if you can see they're probably,
Yeah, there's two sets of two arcs there.
there's two arcs there. Yeah.
So
So,
you might have been, sometimes you do both arcs, so you're running back and forth to the near arc. and the far
no,
arc.
in this case, what I think I do, what we had done is when I put the flags in the first time, I put a dot of spray paint. So the next time I had to do that, all I had to do was put the flags in where the dots were, and then I ran the tape across. We did not measure the arcs every single time because I had the markers out there, the paint marks.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but when you think about that, you have a small amount of time to do a transition.
Yeah.
It's not a lot.
Efficient and smart, David.
It's work in advance. And when you're dealing with okay, so one of the slides I talked about talking with the organizers to understand their time frame of when things need to be set up. All of us know here, working USA track and field meets, even at the highest levels, the field event officials, they come out a couple of hours beforehand, they set up their venue, and then they wait and bring out the athletes. Well, the competition started on Friday at the World Championships, and here we are. It was 5 o'clock on Thursday, and the 3 technical delegates and the head of competition comes up to me and said, "David, how come the high jump is not set up?" I said, "Well, the competition starts tomorrow at 10 a.m. It will be set up by 7 a.m. And they go, "No, we want to see it now." I said, we're very good at doing it. I said, "This is not they taught me a few a-holes right there on the spot. And these are friends of mine. They said, "David, this is not a USA track and field meet. This is a World Athletic meet. And we have other partners that need to see this stuff right now. We need to have all of the, we need to have the high jump and this and that set up right now." Fortunately, all of the officials were having a meeting under the stand someplace. And I went over there and I said, "Folks, hey, we need your help here. We need to get this set up." So they came out, they spent an hour setting everything up. I stayed to about 1 o'clock in the morning, making sure everything was correct. And I sent about 30 or 40 pictures to my friends who are the TDs. And the next morning they came with hugs and kisses. "Thank you very much, David." But it's understanding the expectations of the organizers of when things need to be done. We're not normally used to that. We do things normally at our own time frame, but we have people way above us the higher up we go.
The picture we're looking at right now, that's a distance arc that you put in with sector tape, is that correct?
That's correct. All the long throws, the only time we did not use sector tape for arcs were for the shot put,
Okay,
because the dirt landing area really couldn't hold the staples very well.
okay. And can you go back to that brake line picture, those green rectangles?
Yep.
That's what you put in between the lanes?
Yep. They stood up vertically. They go vertically.
And that's just aluminum then, or?
Yeah, it's actually,
No,
I think
I think
it's
that's a
heavy.
piece of steel.
It's not
Yeah.
gonna kill anyone if they run into it? That seems awful heavy.
No, actually it works out very well, and it really looks very, very cool. And in fact, we also use those when we did a 1-turn stagger between slings 4 and 5. Getting back to that 1-turn stagger. Okay, I want to show you this. Let me just go back for a second here. This was a video. You won't hear the sound. This was from our Olympic trials 2 years ago. We ended up in the women's 10,000 with 41 competitors.
Wow.
Okay, so what do you do with 41 competitors? You put them in a road race? I don't know. So we went back and forth, and I thought, okay, well, we have a one-turn stagger, but that's a lot of people because the people on the back line with a one-turn stagger, the people that are on the common start and finish are going to run into the people on the front box pretty quickly. And so it was suggested that we do a two-turn stagger, which didn't exist on that track. And I went to my friends from World Athletics who are experts on the rules, and they said, no, you're not allowed to do that. Because the rule says, if you look at the formats for how the races are to be run, it only allows for a one-turn staggered. And here we go back to what I said before about mission critical rules. Well, the reality of it is there's a rule in World Athletics. It's called rule number 1. There's a rule called technical rule number 1. And the Cliff Notes version of technical rule number 1 says you can do anything with the competition as long as you're not giving any additional rights to the athletes that they would not have before. So what does that mean? That means I can do a two-turn staggered because they're all running the same distance. So what we did was Justin and I, we measured out and we created a two-turn staggered on an outdoor track, but we didn't do it between lanes 4 and 5 because it's a 9-lane track. The organizing committee of the Olympic trials says, and women's track and field chair, we want to do it between lanes 5 and 6. So I'll show you how it worked out. So you're going to see the first part of the race. I'm sure you can't hear the sound because there's a problem. I don't know how to do sound on the Zoom for this. That wasn't because of what we did. But you can see the tremendous spread between them. It looks like they're worlds apart. And you can see we did cones every 4 meters. And you can see the placement of the cones. This has never been done to my knowledge before. So the whole purpose of this, we didn't want the merge to happen right after the first turn.
Everybody's pretty well spread by then.
Yeah, that was the whole idea. That was the whole idea. And we were happy to do this. And again, this falls under the domain of a technical manager to be able to do that. So that's what we got, Scott.
Hey, back on the green thing.
Let's have questions, please.
Yeah.
Let's have questions. I want you to know that we had 119 people max, and at 6:12 we still had 102. So I'd say you guys have a bully presentation. Let's hear some questions.
Well, Scott, I made all this up, so I don't know.
Sure. Anybody who spent that long in junior high, middle school has that right. I think Bill Kelly's one of those people too. But go ahead, let's hear some questions, please.
On those green brake lines, what was the green made of? Was that the stuff you poke flowers into?
No, it's foam rubber. It was a hard foam rubber.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it was
Thank you.
really kind of cool. It's I really like, it's just as point of information, at the African championships 2 years ago, they didn't have any cones, so they actually used water bottles for the brake line.
I've seen similar stuff used as well, David. NCAA, first one I was working was 99, I think it was 98 rather, in Buffalo. They had small bottles.
Yeah, I mean,
bottles they put down there.
Dual purpose.
I mean, if you don't have cones, it's still a race. That's just a nice thing for us and the runners, but it's not required, is it?
it's not required. No,
Water
it's not
bottles,
required, but
landmines.
it's an aid for the officials and for the
Right,
athletes
yeah.
to ensure that they don't violate the brake line violations. You're absolutely
So-
correct.
A question for you in regard to cones. there is the specification that brake line cones are to be 8 inches. Most of
inches?
the time we use, or 20 centimeters, most of the time we use those little orange cones. Is there any problem at all that you see in using those smaller cones relative to what the rule states?
The only time that I think again, mission critical, okay, the only time I believe that the cone size should make a difference is for those tracks that are designed not to have a curb, because that way it's important to designate the running line of the track. So the other cones for brake lines, I think that's not mission critical, but the ones for that delineate the left-hand side of the track are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's practical application here. If you had a cone that was 4 inches high, which is kind of standard for a brake line, which is acceptable, which is what's used for, if you had something different for a brake line, nobody is going to not ratify the record because of that. Because that's a visual sighting, whereas the cones on the left-hand line of the track is a designation of the actual track for the measurement. Because theoretically, you can. I'll tell. There was a situation a couple of years ago, 2009 in Berlin. Some of you might remember this. The women's 10,000 meter. The rules at the time said that there should be a cone at the brake line, and they ran a 2-group start for the women's 10,000. And I've always been told this, and this proved me correctly. A lot of the women, especially the African women, are not familiar with doing a 2-group start. And the women that were in the outside group, as soon as the gun went off, they went right for the curb.
Hmm.
And from that time on, now we put cones all the way around.
Yeah.
So it's a visual thing.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Dave? It's Reggie.
Yes, Reggie. Yes, Reggie. If it's a race walking question, we don't answer it here. Sorry.
Yeah, I could
Yeah,
probably
just-
answer that anyway. Since you're on what was former IAAF, now World Athletics Technical Committee, you know everyone at World Athletics. They know you. You have a fair amount of leeway and I'm going to say persuasion once you give them the explanation as to why you're doing it. But if this were a championship in a country that World Athletics does not really have a technical manager that they know and trust, not to say that that country has a bad technical manager, how much would that technical manager be doing compared to how much you and your team did?
Well, actually, I think, you'd be surprised. There are some very good ones around the world. By the way, just for clarification, Reggie, I was on the IAAF technical committee for 4 terms, which was an elected position. I had to be run here in the United States to be a candidate internationally, and then I had to run internationally. Unfortunately, I got elected 4 times. World Athletics several years ago did a restructuring when they went from IAAF to World Athletics, and they got rid of all of the committees. They got rid of the technical committee. They got rid of all these other committees, and they created 4 commissions. 3 of them, one of them is athletics commission, one of them is governance, one of them is a competition commission. And it's no longer an elected position. You're selected. You have to go through a very, very detailed vetting process. There are only like a dozen of us on it. And we no longer have committees, but we have what's called work streams. And I am the de facto chair of the technical work stream. In fact, this morning, we had a work stream where we would do what normally the technical committee does, where we reviewed all of the submissions from the member federations for amendments to the rules. So just a clarification of my role and what World Athletics now does with this stuff. And any member, any person from any federation, they're any official ITO or a technical person, they have the same type of I wouldn't say leverage, but input that I have. I'm just a little bit noisier than most of the others. So I realize I am in a quiet taste. And so, but I'm pretty noisy with them. Any other questions?
Well, Jackie,
Yeah, I'm curious about you talked about it a little bit, but you didn't talk about it a lot, just kind of, because it's not something I'm familiar with or have seen before, but the Seiko sort of EDM that's kind of using multiple cameras, I get.
Yeah,
it's triangulate. And so are the cameras all fixed? You get it all set up, you calibrate it with these various targets, and then it just sees where the shot lands and gives you.
No, it's and I have some photos someplace else, and it's an excellent question, and it is technical. I think the guy who wrote Space Odyssey, Arthur Clarke, once said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." So I'll just say that this is magic that it's doing this. So it's fixed cameras, and the end of the process, there is an official looking at his high definition screen who's placing a cursor at the landing area. And just like they would do with photo finish, when a photo finish judge places the cursor and clicks the mouse, it gives a reading. So they're actually looking at the landing area. Same thing with the long jump. So, and they can go back. Is the official
down in the field with a field links or anything like that, or is
no. So just
is he up in the stands, or
he's just imagine a photo finish judge. Okay, a photo finish judge is watching as the stop frames of the athletes when they cross the finish line, and he or she is putting the cursor on the torso, the point that's closest. Okay, that same type of judge is looking at a high definition screen of the landing area, whether it's the long jump, triple jump, or the shot put area, and they can actually see the shot in slow motion hitting the ground and breaking the surface. And they put the cursor right there, click it, and they get the measurement.
Can they run it back too and just dial it in like you can with finish links?
Exactly.
Cool.
It's phenomenal. It's very, 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 very cool.
So in shot, you have, the standard, what you look for is the splash ring separated from the point of impact. Does this present any difficulties for the remote?
No, not with the high definition cameras. And it is pretty remarkable. We have tested this out thoroughly, comparing this to the EDM measurements. And it's consistently within a centimeter of what the EDM comes up with. And I'll go back to that term, reasonable accuracy. When you're dealing with variable substrates where the surfaces where a shot can land with grass and everything else, it's I think it's absolutely remarkable. The great thing about this, Scott, is that you have a video record of this performance. So if there is a protest, one of the things that World Athletics has done over the past 2 decades, and some people who kind of scratch it, really, higher transparency. We want, the bottom line is we want to get to the truth of performances. When we went, it took me 20 years to help get the rule changed to get rid of plasticine, to breaking the playing as they do in NCAA. And that we were only successful when video imaging was off the shelf. And now every athlete can see where he or she was on that takeoff board. We're getting closer to being as fair as possible for athletes. And that's why we are here. We're here to serve the athletes. So it's a very exciting time, the incorporation of technology for judging events.
Can I ask how much that system costs? Just curious.
I don't know.
If you have to ask.
A lot.
Well,
it's super cool.
If you would have answered one of those questions, you would have had the money to get it. So there we go.
Well, I know what a TopCon EDM costs, and they're not cheap either.
It's also my father told me when I was growing up, the most dangerous part of an automobile was the nut behind the wheel. It's the operator. It's making sure that everything is calibrated correctly and so on. For example, the VDM for the horizontal jumps, those cameras are mounted in the stands. So we have to kill a bunch of seats and have these tripods there, with these little cameras on them. It's absolutely remarkable, the technology today, what can be done.
David, you might address with folks as technical manager, how much we need to check and make sure all the calibration of all this high-tech equipment is in accordance with the rules, or do we just take their word for it?
All right, so the things like the VDM, all right, it's used only at the top level competitions because of the expense. And so, for example, at the Olympic Games, it's Omega and their technicians. We have reviewed the equipment with them. They have given us the presentations, same thing with Seiko, and we are dependent upon them to do the calibration. It's out of our wheelhouse to have the ability to calibrate the devices. It's the same thing with photo finish equipment or start equipment. We rely on the manufacturer because we don't have a way of doing that on our own right now. The only thing that we can calibrate and check are things like EDMs, things like that, which is a part of the normal process of our measuring judges. But it's a very good question, David. Question?
David, this is Jackie White.
Hi, Jackie White.
Hi, I got a couple of things. One, Scott first. Scott, once we have gone over the list for the officials and looked at those resumes for the TMs, can we have a meeting with all of those officials, sort of a meet and greet, and kind of go over some of these things well in advance?
Are you talking about the national?
For the
JO?
JOs, yes.
I can certainly put in that recommendation, Jackie. I am downstream from the people who are, the meet organizers, et cetera. But I'll certainly put that in as a request.
Wonderful.
Great idea. Yeah.
Wonderful. And so, David, can you go over? You asked early, who might be interested in becoming a TM, and I'm just wondering, are there any requirements for that position, or what the process is for training? Because what you talked about was so technical. I can't imagine that it would be the same, through each of the associations.
Yeah, it's a good question, and what I've told the officials committee, Mike Armstrong, the only way that I think, well, the best way, not the only way, to become a good technical manager is to work with a veteran technical manager as apprentice. This is one of those, we have a really good mentoring program with all of our other official positions, whether starters or referees or field events. This is such an odd position that I couldn't possibly put everything in writing on this. What you need to do. And again, what I mentioned before is it's also a state of mind. It's a type of personality. And you also have to be that type of person that says, I make mistakes, and how am I going to prevent those mistakes? Because we are all human. And so you're always looking for where's the next error. You're looking for where's the next error, and you're always looking for risk management. Where is a potential safety issue out there? So for myself and others like Bob and Dave and Justin, our radar is always out looking for a safe environment, to ensure a safe environment out there. It's really is a mindset. And if you go into, and if you're going to go into this thinking that you know everything, you're wrong, because I'm far from that.
Ed, just a minute here. Diane, you had submitted an application for a young or emerging technical manager, or you have something to do with that?
Scott, is that for me?
Yes, it is.
Jackie, so It is not. As the chair, as the chair for the youth, we, as I mentioned, this is going to be a position at our championship. We had it in Sacramento, but there in the Pacific Association, they have TMs, so they were available to us. But for the JOs there in Oregon this year, we will have a TM. And I put in the chat, there's a grant available for TMs. I've just put it in again for you guys. So if those of us that are interested in that, becoming a TM official, there is a grant available. There's some information that you guys can get. And we have received 2 resumes to share with the Oregon Association for
And one of them is Diane's.
Yes, it is. Right. I don't see her on the call.
She's on the call.
Okay, so we received 2 that we will share and go over that. And so, David, that's one of my questions, because one of the things that I ask about from a checklist perspective is what, and this is a question, what if you show up at a meet? So like myself as the chair, and I'm looking around and I noticed that our TM doesn't do all of those things that you've, kind of laid out that are required. Is there a process, or what are the things that we do from that perspective?
I'm not sure that most of the TDs in the world will do what I do.
Right.
So don't go by what I presented as my standard. I wouldn't expect anybody walking on, or even with a year or 2 experience, to have 50 years of experience that I do. And the perspectives. Okay. So I would hold them to a less higher standard.
Okay.
It's a process. So I would just leave it at that. There are a lot of very, very good people out there that have the potential and the basic skill set to get the job done.
David, would you share your number? Because I'm one of those people that stay up late too, and I sort of want to like to get things right. So I would like to develop a checklist of things with the understanding that we might not have everything or catch everything, but with the understanding that there are some things, looking at the document that was provided for TMs, there are some things that we should do no matter what. And there are things that from a youth perspective, when we go and we take a look at the facility and we have our field rep and our CHAC rep, we're certainly not doing a lot of the things that you talked about. But I think having a checklist to ensure that we do go over those things, or at least we start to look at areas.
Yeah, I think if we get you, if Justin, if you can send her the document from George Kleeman.
Yeah,
that's
go ahead. I actually put it in the chat.
Is that the one that was that you put in the 2008 or 2002?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Right. I downloaded that. Okay.
That was
Yeah,
pretty.
that's pretty a lot of what I talked about is on the presentation side. That is not necessary to implement that at the level you may be talking about right now for the youth and so on. For those competitions for the younger people, you have the various hurdle heights and the hurdle distances, and it's just really important to get those right, to get the basic right, the fundamentals right, making sure the sectors are correct, the foundation and safety, the stuff about the presentation part, that's for the higher level, that's for the TV, that's for that's another level, but start with the basics and work your way up from there. I think that's a good point, a good starting point.
Ed Viesters, you had a very, excuse me.
Yeah, I was going to ask about a mere mortals meet, and I think he's just sort of covered that. You basically do what you can with your level of skill and your budget. Specifically, though, you get there, the sector lines are wrong. They've been wrong all season. I can prove they're wrong, but I can't erase them. Say a big high school meet or a JO meet. Any recommendation? I mean,
Yeah, yeah. You want to, I'm
Green.
sorry, Ted.
Green spray paint,
uh,
Yeah, it looks
Grass.
like,
grass.
or what you do is you buy a couple of rolls of yellow sector tape.
right. Okay.
And if you
Uh-huh.
want to, I can show you the trick how to do sector lines by yourself. There's a
no-
trick.
No problem.
There's a trick to that.
I
it's-
can show you too, Ed.
By the way, years ago, many years ago, when I saw they changed the sector from 40 degrees to 3492, when I first saw that number, I started scratching my head and I had to pull out my old trig table. And I realized that these people are pretty damn smart, you know, because all you have to do is go 20 out and go 12 across, and you got your shot put and hammer and not discus, and discus throw sectors. So it was pretty cool. So it's a simple way of doing it.
Dave, why don't I just kind of address the novice career path a little bit here with
Please do.
folks?
Please.
Because that's kind of where I was at a couple years ago. I'd served in the role at some high school meets and the state high school meet. And people kept telling me, Dave, you're going to make a great technical manager. You need to get into it. And so I just, every time I was at a national championship and there was a technical manager there, I would follow him around like a little puppy dog, sucking everything out of their brain that I could. Even if I was a field event official or something, every time there was a break, I'd go follow the technical manager around and just ask him questions. And so that's how you can start absorbing all this, what you can build up in your box of tools. I mean, I got Carol DeWeese's suitcase out and I took a picture of everything in his suitcase. And so I could see what all the tools that he's built up over the years that he brings to meets. And I even brought some extra stuff like a battery powered air compressor. So that I was at a meet where the starters were struggling to pull the block cart around the track because the tires were flat. So I just walked up with my air compressor and filled up the tires for them. And man, they were blessing me out. That's why number 5 on a list of things, priorities of a technical manager, anything else that makes the meet go smoother. And that's part of our role too. Anything else that makes the meet go smoother. So
You should be ashamed of yourself, Dave, for helping the starters out like that. They're just one-trick ponies, those guys.
One of the things I do whenever I have a meet in a different area there, first thing I do, I go online and look at a map of the area and find the closest Home Depot.
Yep.
It's a prerequisite.
Well, let's have a couple more if we have a couple more, and then we'll bid our presenters a very pleasant good night because we have
no,
two of
Josiah's
them
got a
on.
question.
Go ahead.
Josiah, go ahead.
Thank you, David. I appreciate your comment on a related matter about thinking in terms of, for the throwing event, where the implement rack is placed. I agree with your observation that you don't want an implement rack, for example, in the javelin throw, anywhere near the runway, and for the circle throws anywhere near the circle. I appreciate the lead matter about the sense of where you have television or video that you don't, and this is from my extensive experience as an implement inspector at national championships. An implement inspection card should not be anywhere near where television or video is going to be going to be shooting, and also because you've got that much metal, it just can't be anywhere in a place where anyone involved then could trip over it. because the last thing we want have to do is stop all competition because someone has gone down with an injury.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your option.
Is there anybody else? Well, guys, thank you very much. We are very much in your debt for agreeing to be on tonight. This was a fascinating Zoom, and please reserve a spot on the calendar next year for a reprise of this. We take a night off tomorrow, and then we return on Thursday for a hammer and weight presentation. And so we would like you, if you will, please, to join in on that. As you'll see, I'm circling here the 9th of February for our presentation there. If you have any questions or comments that you would like, a request for the video or for any slides that David and fellows can send, then that's my email to request those. And then as you'll see next week, we continue with our throws with discus, and then we go to implement inspection, EDMR, race walk, and then 2 in March, we have a need for Mr. Phoenix to change the date here. We're going to have referee scenarios on the 6th of March. So thank you very much, everybody. Please join us again.
Just before you go, I just could I leave my email someplace? Let's see. Justin,
Sure.
can you throw my email in there?
Type it into the chat, David, and I
Okay,
can
thank you.
send it out to people.
be
When
good.
you request the video comes with the chat that is addressed to everybody. If you have made a comment at all personally to someone, that's not transcribed.
Thank you, Sky. My
All
apologies.
right. Thank you, guys.
Good
Thanks
night.
for hosting this.
You guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.